I ask? Huh? White black people.
Who knows?
What are you people? We're Americans.
In 2017, Jordan Peele, a famous comedian from the sketch comedy show Key and Peele, shocked the entire world with his release of a horror thriller movie titled Get Out. The movie surprised the world for a lot of different reasons. For one, Jordan Peele? Really? The guy who played Meegan on a comedy show directed and made a horror movie? And not only was the creator shocked, but the movie was also received amazingly well. The directing and camera work were both praised, having some of the most stunning shots in a horror movie up until that point. The acting and casting choices were universally beloved, and the movie even went on to win 4 Oscars, including Best Director and Best Picture. But one part of the movie that was discussed and analyzed above all else was the deep thematic messages the movie was expressing. Not only was the movie a technical masterpiece, but the rich and powerful statements made by the movie cut deep to the audience. But Peele didn't stop there. With his release of Us 2 years later, Peele continued to flex his abilities to bring deep and important messages to the mainstream. Us was also received very well, but it was a much more divided movie. Regardless, the messages of this movie were praised by enjoyers and haters alike. Following this movie, Peele released Nope in 2022, and once again, regardless of your opinions on the film, the messages were potent and evident in this movie. And today, I want to look at all of these. Not necessarily the films, I'll touch on what makes them great and why I love all 3 of them, but I want to focus on what makes Jordan Peele's secret messages absolute genius. Let's start with Get Out, probably the most discussed and analyzed film in Peele's entire catalog. On the surface, Get Out has a pretty easy to comprehend theme: racism and racial prejudice against Black Americans. And I'm going to give a quick disclaimer for everyone before I speak on this film in particular. I am a white male, therefore I cannot possibly fully understand or articulate the true nature of the themes expressed by this movie. There are of course going to be lapses in my judgment, I will likely make mistakes, but I'm going to try to do the best that I can to explain my take on the movie and its themes. Continuing with the movie, the themes of racism, particularly towards Black Americans, is expressed through a variety of very interesting and creative ways. For one is the blatant, in-your-face showings of racist behaviors. When Chris and Rose, the main protagonists, get into a car accident, the cop, despite Chris not driving, asks Chris for his driver's license. This is one of the first instances of the movie showing what most people would consider obvious racism. Having the image of an innocent Black man being questioned by the police in this way is a way for Peele to make the audience uncomfortable, not only because it's difficult to watch, but also because it's emblematic of real-world events that hurt many people daily. Through this one scene, Peele gets across a very important message. Racism is a very real thing that still exists. The theme is further shown more subtly throughout the movie by the family's dialogue. Once Chris and Rose get to Rose's family home, Rose mentions them hitting a deer on the way. In response, Rose's father says this:
I don't mean to get on my high horse, but I'm telling you, I do not like the deer. I'm sick of it. They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem. I see a dead deer on the side of the road. I think to myself, that's a start.
What interested me about this dialogue is that language like this can be very easily substituted for different racial groups, especially the line,
They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem.
taking a word like deer and putting it in sentences like these that can be easily switched into a racist connotation continues the theme of racial prejudice. And because this scene is so closely after the scene with the cop, a scene that directly shows racist profiling by the police, the audience is placed in the perfect spot to pick up on dialogue details like this. It allows the audience to deepen their understanding with what the movie is trying to say through subtle dialogue choices. Now, that's not to say that the theme is always explained in a hidden or subtle manner. The themes are further shown once Dean gives Chris a tour of the home. Throughout this tour, there are a lot of subtle microaggressions made towards Chris. Subtle yet obvious lines targeted at Chris's race that initially seem to be lukewarm or even positive statements. One of the first somewhat racist things said during this tour is,
Such a privilege to be able to experience another person's culture. You know what I'm saying?
Which on its own does not seem to be a racist statement. However, Peele uses this line in the context of an older white man talking to a younger black man, and the way the line is delivered definitely doesn't come off to the audience as endearing or genuine. It intentionally feels like the only reason Dean is saying this is because Chris is black. Immediately after this, Dean shows a picture collage of his father as a runner who got beat by Jesse Owens to go to Berlin for the 1936 Summer Olympics. The scene, however, is prefaced by the line,
You're gonna love this.
implying that for some reason, Chris, opposed to another person, would enjoy hearing this story about a black athlete doing something great. Another obvious jab at Chris based solely on his race. Later on the tour, when Chris and Dean go outside, two things are said that further the theme heavily. The first is that Dean mentions that he hates to be the typical white family with black servants cliche, once again tying the tour specifically to race. The second is literally 30 seconds later when Dean, pretty much out of nowhere, says,
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
Not only does this tie in what Rose said earlier, it also furthers the themes. It may seem inconsequential to a lot of people what Dean is doing here, but Peele uses this tour to show that racism, whether it be subtle or in your face, is so constant in American society. The audience during this interaction is meant to feel like they're being hit in the face by every backhanded remark made by Dean. While it's not so subtle in this scene, the desired effect pushes the theme onto the audience in a spectacular way. What Dean does during this tour is time and time again belittle Chris down to one characteristic. He shows and talks to Chris about the things he thinks Chris will like solely because he's black. If Rose had hypothetically brought home, let's say, a white boyfriend, would Dean have even mentioned Jesse Owens by name, or would he have said that he enjoys understanding other people's culture? Would he have mentioned the white family black servants quote-unquote cliche? And the answer to most of these questions is probably no. Peele uses the scene very deliberately to push the theme of racism out onto the audience. It's purposeful and obvious, but elusive. It's easy to understand on a basic level, but on a deeper level, it becomes dreadful and worrisome. In addition to the literal lines being spoken here, the way they're delivered also delivers the theme, mainly through the way the father uses African American vernacular to say certain lines. The first example of this is when Dean says,
Call me Dean and you're hungry, my man.
followed quickly by,
So how long has this been going on, this thing?
Now, this is the definition of subtlety, mainly because this can be excused as this just being how Dean talks or something similar. I actually didn't pick up on it on my first watch through. However, the fact that the camera focuses on Missy's face during it implies a deeper and more, at least to her, annoying reason for his choice in speaking here. Not only is the use of specific vernacular used, but when Dean says,
I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could.
the specific way the actor delivers the line is deliberately lame. Rose says that he's a lame dad, so having the character say something racist in a way that gives off a tone of a somewhat lame dad trying to make conversation hides the racist intent a little. The audience knows this line is racist and targeted at Chris only because he's black, but the choice of delivery hides the malice behind dirty glass. Noticeable, but hidden. It's further hidden during the porch scene when Dean brings up Chris's smoking. This isn't tied to race, shockingly, but the way he cuts off Missy makes the entire tour up until this point feel just like characterization. Was it deliberate racism, or was it ignorance? That question gets answered, however, when Rose and Chris go to sleep. She explains how annoyed she is with how her family reacted to Chris, how Jeremy tried to put her in a headlock, and how Dean said,
And then my dad was my man stuff. My man, my man. I don't think he's ever heard that or said it, and now that's all he says.
Through her reaction and Chris's indifference towards it, the theme is explored deeper, showing how often black people are forced to just put up with the racism in front of them out of fear or familiarity, and how white people are often ignorant to the fact. And obviously, all the dialogue I just pointed out is partly ignoring the twist of the movie. Chris's reactions are real, but Rose is playing a character here. Every character in the movie is acting and pretending to be this kind, yet heavily flawed family to lure Chris into the brain transplant. However, the way Peele uses the dialogue still applies to the themes of the movie. Every racist remark, every reaction from Chris is used to further the themes. In the context of the movie, they're fake, but to the audience, it's purposeful and intentional. And most importantly is the fact that the movie is taken from a black point of view. We see the movie through the eyes of Chris. Peele plays with this relationship between the audience and the main character by making every line of dialogue feel like a regular occurrence. Nothing about the dialogue in these opening scenes feels out of place because, from a black perspective, casual racism like this happens all of the time. Obviously, I can only speak from secondhand experiences from what others have told me, but racism is constant for a lot of people. control, and often black people and other minorities are forced to put up with it. Through Chris, the audience is shown how black people often have to cooperate and tolerate this type of behavior, the cop in the beginning being the biggest example of this. There are a lot more examples of the themes being expressed by dialogue, but let's move on to the plot of the movie. This is where the themes of Get Out are further explored in a very important way. First is the sunken place. During the scene where Missy and Chris talk about Chris's mother, Missy puts Chris under a strange hypnosis effect. This location of the sunken place, a void where the voice of Chris can't be heard, a place of an endless spiraling, falling loss of ability and strength, is Peele's physical representation of marginalization. The very real fact that black people's voices, no matter how hard they scream, often go unheard and ignored. As stated by IndieWire, Peele also harkens the sunken place to be the equivalent of when you're falling in a dream and you suddenly wake up, but what if you never woke up? What if you kept falling forever and couldn't make any noise for yourself? Knowing this, the themes of marginalization and racism are further emphasized by the sunken place. Marginalization is a wide-ranging problem with a lot of different ramifications and effects, but as a whole, marginalization is when certain groups of people aren't able to access the same jobs, political opportunities, healthcare, etc. that other groups are able to. The sunken place is used by Peele to take the idea of marginalization and apply it to a visual sense. Like I said, it's a physical representation. But the way Chris interacts with it and how he just falls and claws at the air trying to get out but never being able to shows that he's at the whim of Missy. He's at the whim of a racist society that holds him and millions of others down. Chris's powerlessness to escape the sunken place shows the impossible ability to escape certain real-world situations because of the effects of marginalization. Chris can't be heard, Chris can't be seen, he's stuck in a void of darkness that's impossible to escape. The image of marginalization through the sunken place is evident to the audience. Also, keep in mind that the object Missy uses to put Chris into the sunken place is a silver spoon, one of the biggest symbols of class wealth and privilege. Class systems that give some people wealth and power put others into a never-ending pit of poverty and marginalization. The sunken place is a big example of Peele's symbolism and how he gets his themes across. Another is what saves Chris's life: the chair. Peele said in an interview that
we had a special arm of the chair made with cotton stuffed into it so we could have the grand irony of him being freed by cotton. You get it.
I probably don't have to explain this one, but just in case, in American history, a lot of African slaves were put on cotton plantations. So having the irony of Chris picking cotton actually helping him pushes the themes in a very interesting and nuanced way. And harkening back on racist history is another very fascinating way of getting this point across. Now, up until this point, the theme I've been talking about is a broad idea of racism, but I actually think it goes much deeper than that. Because at a surface level, sure, some racist remarks, statements, and visualizations give off that easy to understand theme. But the big theme of this movie, a theme that is much deeper than just the blanket statement of racism, is the racist societal system in place, and how white people who claim to be not racist benefit from and do nothing to stop it. The societal system of this movie is the brain transplant, and its real world counterpart can be many different things, but it's the twist of the Armitages taking black people's bodies and forcing their white brains into them. And this family, the white family, benefits off of that system. They live forever from it. But the problem arises with the obvious fact that this severely harms the black people they're profiting off of. They are literally stealing from them and forcing them into the sunken place. And any one of these family members could have tried to stop it or do something, but the theme comes in when all of these people who, if you asked on any day, "Are you racist?" would say no, benefit from it. Rose and Jeremy are a perfect example of this. Given the age of the TV in the basement, it's safe to say that this procedure done by the Armitages has been going on for quite some time, likely before Rose and Jeremy were born. So they were born into this system, this racist system of kidnapping and torture, meaning they had an opportunity to walk away from it since birth, but they embraced it because it benefited them. As kids, this was all they knew, but as they grew up, as Cinnamon Winds puts it,
"You're only blameless for so long."
They are symbols for the white people ignoring the flaws of a racist system because they get something out of it. The line by Rose about her parents actually sums up this point perfectly.
How are they different than that cop?
In Peele's eyes, anyone who does nothing to combat the racist system they benefit from are no better than quote-unquote in-your-face racists. Racism is bigger than just the evident, obvious racism. In the basement, when Chris asks why they take advantage of only black people, Jim then laughs and says,
"Who knows? People want to change. Some people want to be stronger, faster,
cooler.
Jim, the blind art dealer, is also an amazing example of purposeful white ignorance in the face of a racist system. In his words, and he made sure Chris heard this, he doesn't care what race Chris is. But that doesn't change the fact that he still encourages and enables a system that he knows is built on racist assumptions and actions. That is, in my opinion, the takeaway for this movie. Racism is more than you think. Someone claiming they're not racist and then participating in a system that harms a group of people for their own personal gain is, in the eyes of Peele, racist. Now, I can go on and on about what makes Get Out as a movie so spectacular and marvelous. I could talk about the camera, the acting, the music, dialogue for years. Genuinely, there's so much to talk about with this movie, but focusing on the themes and the thematic importance of this movie is one of the most fascinating parts of it. The way Peele is able to make the beginning of the movie feel like a bombardment of racism and then slowly pulling back the curtain to reveal centuries of racism that seeped its way into society is genius. The use of the fictional Armitages masterfully explores and exposes the concept of racial oppression and exploitation that millions deal with on a daily basis. It's a tragedy that needs to be talked about despite how uncomfortable it is. Peele, through this movie, shows how dangerous racism can be and how destructive it can be. We, as the audience, consume this horror through the lens of a camera, but the real horror, the terror of this movie, is the reality Peele is expressing.
I wrote the movie primarily during the post-racial lie. So the Obama era, when everyone was saying, hey, we're past racism, right? The notion of sort of bringing up racism was almost thought of as like the perpetuating it. And so the movie was originally meant to be a more direct, brutal wake-up call to say no.
Let's move on to Us, which is a very different movie to understand. It actually took me 2 watch-throughs to fully understand the metaphor being expressed in this movie. Buried deep under layers of symbolism, dialogue, and imagery are themes of the American dream that the audience has to dig to uncover. Us follows a family called the Wilsons on a fun little vacation. Fun until they run into a mirror version of themselves called the Tethered. Now, why do I say this movie is about the American dream, and more specifically, why it's impossible? Well, let's talk about it. Throughout the beginning of the movie, the audience is shown a picturesque version of the American dream through the Wilsons. They have a big, nice house, a large family, and the biggest being the boat that Gabe buys. The boat is unnecessary, it's flashy, it's broken, and a perfect example of wealth. And going further, the boat is what ends up killing Gabe's tether as he gets sucked into the engine. Through this, the symbol of the American dream directly kills a tether. And throughout the movie, the tethered are used as symbols for those in poverty, and the things that kill them as symbols for wealth and class. For example, the twins tethered are killed by Zora using a golf club, a tool used for a sport that is considered a sport of wealth and privilege. Zora's tether, however, is killed by being hit by a car. The car in particular, though, was owned by the Tylers, another family that throughout the movie is shown to be rich and comfortable. The car is a manifestation of their wealth. Even once the Tylers are all killed, Zora says,
"Does this mean we get their car?"
further cementing the car as a material representation of wealth and class privilege. Kitty is killed by Jason holding a rock geode trophy object, a symbol of wealth because of the expensive yet unnecessary purpose of it. Red, on the other hand, isn't killed by a symbol of wealth, but rather a symbol of oppression. In her final moments, Red is killed by Adelaide by being strangled with handcuffs. Handcuffs are probably the easiest symbol to discern. Police, and going deeper, police brutality of minorities. Having the main tethered killed by a tool used by police is tragic. It shows the failure of the American dream through systems that keep certain peoples out and down, the police being one of them. And why do I say the tethered are symbolic of people in poverty? Well, during the end of the movie, the audience explores the place where they used to live, a massive hallway system with rooms meant to be replicas of the world up top. Peele uses this underground world to show that people in poverty are stuck and unable to escape. The tethered are literally buried hundreds of feet underground, similar to how being in poverty can feel like you're buried under the pressure and difficulties of it. The place they live in is dark and uncanny. They aren't given the same luxuries as those up top. The tethered were for a long time trapped down here. The people up top lived perfect lives while their mirrored versions lived in the dark. Everything those did up top, they did, but in an unequal way. They ate raw rabbit, they couldn't choose what they wanted in life, and anything that brought happiness to those up top brought pain and suffering to those below. below. Further evidence that the tethered are symbolic for those in poverty is the Hands Across America device. The opening of the movie is an impressive slow zoom in on the Hands Across America advertisement playing on a TV. Hands Across America was a real event that took place in the 80s, where millions of Americans held hands for 15 minutes to raise awareness and money to fight American homelessness and hunger. The interesting thing about this event, though, is that it raised significantly less than was expected, roughly $15 million after expenses, when the plan was to raise $50 to $100 million. So, in the eyes of a lot of people, Hands Across America could be seen as an attempt to help a lot of people while not helping enough. The tether's fascination and eventual recreation of the Hands Across America line is a genius way of getting across the theme of the American dream. Even while millions of Americans physically band together to try to fight poverty, it still ends up being a failure. Red states that they wanted to send a statement to the rest of the world, and through the use of a real-world event, the message is clear. The American dream is impossible to obtain, no matter how hard those in power or those around try to help. An interesting detail about this, however, is once Red gets to talk to the Uptop family and Gabe asks who they are, she gives a very interesting response.
We're Americans.
Peele uses this line very expertly. It's a complete subversion of what you'd expect a horror villain to say in this moment. My personal initial thought on what her response would be was, "We're you," or "We're your nightmare," or something similar. But the line very clearly states that they're Americans. This is a very important line for the themes, however. As mentioned, it's a subversion, but it also very clearly tells the audience what to set their minds on. They should put these tethered in the context of America and Americans who live there. And since they are forced underground and are unable to escape, it shows a very clear image of what millions of Americans have to deal with on a daily basis. The American dream is flawed. The Wilsons and the Tylers live this perfect lifestyle emblematic of the American dream, while millions of others are forced into the dark, forced to stay in poverty where they can't be heard, can't be seen, and are forgotten about by the people above them, whether it be physically in this movie or in the terms of class and wealth in the real world. The tethered throughout this movie are representations of the millions of Americans in poverty, while the Wilsons and Tylers are representations of the wealthy elites. The movie juggles this juxtaposition masterfully. An interesting way of doing this being the fact that the tethered are unable to speak. Red is the only tethered we see that is able to speak. The rest are limited to grunts, yells, and shrieks. The choice to make the tethered silent observers is Peele's description of how those groups of people in the real world are often unheard and ignored. Even Red, the only tethered we see make any cohesive dialogue, can only speak through a shriveled and raspy voice, almost as if any attempt of speaking out or voicing her thoughts causes pain and anguish. Similar to the silent nature of the sunken place, the lack of dialogue from the majority of tethered shows how powerless and disregarded those in poverty are often treated by those above them in class, and even how difficult it can be for those who try or are able to speak up. This movie's tethered are pushed down time and time again until they are forgotten and buried. They are used until they aren't useful anymore and then tossed aside. That's the true horror of this movie and the power of its statements and themes.
One of the central themes in Us is that we can do a good job collectively of ignoring the ramifications of privilege. I think it's the idea that what we feel like we deserve comes, at the expense of someone else's freedom or joy. The biggest disservice we can do as a faction with a collective privilege like the United States is to presume that we deserve it, and that it isn't luck that has us born where we're born. For us to have our privilege, someone suffers.
And finally, we have Nope, the most recent in Jordan Peele's lineup. Nope is a tricky one to talk about because not only are there multiple stories being told through this movie, it also has multiple major themes. Themes of racism and racial ignorance in Hollywood, themes of trauma and how we deal with it, and many more. But there are two themes of this movie I think are more focused on and developed than the rest. The first scene of this movie shows an old 90s sitcom covered in blood and reeking of disaster. Then a monkey walks into frame covered in blood on its hands and face. Following this, we cut to the main character OJ on his ranch. But this opening scene of the sitcom is one of the most important scenes in the whole movie for its themes. We later meet Jupe, the person whose point of view we took during that scene, who explains this monkey incident in more detail. He describes it as
6 minutes and 13 seconds of havoc.
saying that one of the chimps that the show used to hit its limit and went crazy. He then, instead of expressing the true horrors of what he saw, mentions a sketch done by SNL on the incident.
You haven't seen the Bad Gordy sketch on SNL? I mean, it pretty much nailed it better than I could.
He is only able to explore this tragedy through the lens of entertainment. And when the audience actually sees the event in more detail, both the inciting incident that caused the chimp to attack and the aftermath, it is shown that this event was tragic and scarring, but that viewers looked at it for entertainment. Jupe even says,
It was a spectacle. People are just obsessed.
people watching the event didn't see it as a tragic event, they watched it for the purposes of entertainment. Further cementing this idea is the fact that the applause lights are going off when Gordy is attacking everyone. This is Peele telling the audience that seeking tragedy for entertainment, whether it be online, the news, or however you get access to it, just the act of seeking that out or watching it is a problem. The way Peele uses the camera to approach the incident from behind the set gives the audience a glimpse into something they shouldn't be seeing, a glimpse into what the spectacle really is. Not entertainment, but tragedy. So while the average viewer sees this as entertainment, Peele's use of the camera shows the deeper story behind the tragedy and the true problem with seeking it for entertainment. And if we shift our focus to the main plot of the movie, once the team tries to capture a picture of Jean Jacket, the alien of the movie, a guy riding a motorcycle shows up. This is revealed to be someone working for the paparazzi or some sort of news agency,
It's TMZ.
seeking to get footage of the alien on camera. One of the first things he does is question M about what happened to Jupiter's claim. After dozens of people go missing, this guy tries to question those nearby. This reporter is a fascinating character who only gets a few minutes of screen time. He and the organization he works for is trying to profit off of the disappearance. The questions he asks, and especially the line,
What's the matter? Don't you want to be on TV?
show how those who exploit tragedies for viewership are only seeking attention. They grab people's attention for their own personal gain. Even when the cameraman gets into an accident, the first thing he asks is,
Did you get that on camera?
and when he's being sucked up by Jean Jacket, he screams out for his camera. He's literally about to be eaten alive, and his worry is that they won't capture it on camera. All he, and through the symbolism, anyone who exploits tragedy for viewership, cares about is getting everything on camera for the viewers to watch. Human suffering is viewed by these companies as something to pay the bills, something for people to watch for entertainment. That's the problem with spectacle that Peele's highlighting here, the danger of it and how it affects the world. The quote-unquote villain of the movie also contributes to the themes of spectacle and tragedy. The mystery of Nope is a flying saucer called Jean Jacket that sucks people and horses up into the sky. The main drive of the protagonists, OJ, M, and Angel, is to take a photo of the creature in order to get famous and rich. However, the twist towards the middle of the movie is that JJ is actually an animal, not a spaceship, and that the people in the movie are only killed by it if they make direct eye contact with the creature. This is an interesting detail, however, as Peele is very clearly making the connection between viewing something and that viewing being the cause of your demise. When Jupe holds the Star Lasso experience, he unveils Jean Jacket to his audience. There are a lot of interesting details throughout the show that tie in viewing spectacle as something to fear. For example, when Jean Jacket first shows up, everyone gets up and stares at it, almost in a trance, as if they're unable to look away from this unbelievable sight. Then they get sucked up and eaten. Jupe even creates a large amount of merchandise meant to resemble the aliens, showing the capitalist nature of capturing spectacle, how those in power try to profit off and gain viewership of tragedy and spectacle. Also, the alien faces resemble the cameras used to film Gordy's home, as if the camera, the thing used to capture spectacle, is seen by him as an alien object in control of the spectacle. He calls the aliens,
By an alien species, I call the viewers.
which is a parallel between the audience as viewers of spectacle and tragedy, basically explaining the power that viewers hold in compared to those who profit off of tragedy. The crew are wearing the same outfit that Gordy wore during his attack, showing his mistranslation of that tragedy as just entertainment. Even Jupe's outfit is meant to glorify the alien, with the glowy UFO and flowers possibly representing the weird shape it can turn into. Jupe wears this flashy outfit designed off of the alien, a way to show its spectacle to the audience. What the Star Lasso experience does is show the dangers of spectacle for both those who profit off and those who consume it. Jupe thinks he's in control of the alien species and thinks he can profit off of it, but he's wrong, and that exploitation of Jean Jacket leads to the death of dozens of people. But the people could have survived if they just ran away or didn't look at it. And during the Gordy's home scene, eye contact between Gordy and Jupe is obstructed by both the balancing shoe and the tablecloth. Thus, it's it's very clear that eye contact between a person and the spectacle, whether it be a UFO or a tragic event, is the danger, both in the movie but also in the real world. You giving something your attention indirectly supports that thing, and Peele throughout Nope shows that that is a problem. Humans are drawn to spectacle, both good and bad, and Peele uses Jean Jacket to blatantly show the problem with looking at it. It hurts those affected by the spectacle, and it leads to the viewer's downfall. In addition to spectacle, though, a big part of this movie's messaging is also the environment and humanity's encroachment on and destruction of nature. The ending of the movie heavily focuses on the team's plan and execution to take a photo and, in the process, kill Jean Jacket. The interesting thing about this ending, however, is how Jean Jacket is actually visualized. The movement of the creature is very similar to that of a fish or a shark or some other marine animal. It glides through the air like a fish swims in water, and OJ even states that the creature is territorial and claimed this place as its home. So an interesting question forms out of this. Are the protagonists justified in killing Jean Jacket? People have compared this movie to the movie Jaws, and that's an interesting comparison. On the surface, it's a quite basic assumption. Jaws' villain is a big shark that eats a few people and by the end gets killed by the protagonist. Nope's villain is a big creature that eats some people and gets killed by the end. However, an interesting thing about Jaws is that it amplified a worldwide fear of sharks. It wasn't the first thing to spark this fear, but it did make millions of people irrationally feared of sharks and even amplified the killing sprees of sharks for sport. The film's depiction of sharks as bloodthirsty man-killers is considered today as a huge environmental problem, as it led to a massive decrease in shark populations. So why do I mention this? Well, it's because Nope makes a big statement about humanity's impacts on the nature around us. Jean Jacket is villainized for its mass murder of Jupiter's Claim and its indirect killing of OJ's father. However, it is explained throughout the movie that humans encroached on the land occupied by Jean Jacket. So the group killing Jean Jacket is similar to, say, humans getting on a boat and killing a shark way out in its own habitat. This is even shown during the fast food scene when, in the background, two rival groups get into a fight over presumably territory. Jean Jacket and its death symbolize humans going deeper and deeper into nature's territory and killing the inhabitants. Furthering this is the fact that JJ is killed by eating a plastic balloon. So not only do the human characters kill JJ on its own turf, but they also do it with something very clearly representing pollution, a plastic balloon. The movie's environmental themes are calling humans out. We don't leave animals alone, but we also create pollution that leads to the death of millions of animals. The tone of the final moments of Jean Jacket are also pretty gloomy, exciting and triumphant, but also somber in the death of this creature. Jean Jacket is a perfect symbol for both major themes of this movie. Looking at spectacle and giving your attention to the tragedies of this world for entertainment purposes is exploitation, and looking at Jean Jacket literally leads to the death of characters. Add on the character of Jupe and his story with both Gordy and JJ, you get a powerful message on spectacle and the dangers of capitalizing on tragedy for viewership and monetary gain. Both Gordy and Jean Jacket show the dangers of exploitation of animals and the dangers of training certain types of animals. OJ's father even states,
"I guess some animals ain't fit to be trained."
This furthers the idea that humans' exploitation of nature and animals is a major problem, and viewing that as a source of spectacle and entertainment is a huge problem. And through Jean Jacket's territorial lifestyle as a predator, the protagonist's encroachment on its land, and its death through a plastic balloon, it symbolizes the environment and how humanity is slowly killing it. What a genius way of getting these themes across.
The word that we said the most on set, or I said the most, was spectacle. And so that was the starting point for me in a lot of ways of what I knew I wanted to give the audience. And it was a lot of the analysis that I did in thinking about what we were discussing and what we were dealing with. A lot of the analysis dealt with spectacle and this industry and business of spectacle, and that there's a magic to it and something that I've devoted my life to being a part of, and there's also something insidious about it.
Jordan Peele is a genius. The fact that I can sit here and talk about every line of dialogue he writes, every camera and cinematographic choice, every Bible verse, every acting choice to further his messages for this long is a testament to his artistic strength and the true mastermind that he is. I tried to avoid talking about the quality of each respective movie because I think that deserves its own respective video. But Jordan Peele is a filmmaker that's so unique that any of his movies can be someone's favorite. I know from my personal life that people have wildly different picks on what their favorite is. I have family family that say Nope is the best. I have family that say they didn't understand Nope. I have people who say Get Out is the best. I have friends who it didn't click with. I have family who say Us is the best movie, while I know certain people that hate that movie. If you want me to talk about the movies, let me know and I'll consider it. And while you're at it, let me know which is your favorite and why. This video was just an exploration of how amazingly Peele is able to express deep philosophical and societal themes through an almost hidden way. Every movie has a or multiple messages to which every part of the movie goes to furthering. Sometimes the theme is easy to understand, while other times you really have to dig to uncover the true horror of it. Peele's filmography is truly a masterclass in how to create terrifying movies that say something important. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I had a blast making this one. God bless all of you. Have a good day, friends.